Today in Flex in the City, we talk to Sandy Begbie, CEO of the Scottish financial enterprise. Sandy challenges financial services to have the courage to change the recipe to achieve true inclusion. All that happening right now in Flex and the City.
Hello, everybody. This is Rachel Treese for Flex in the City. This is a podcast all about leadership in the financial services industry. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have Sandy Begbie, who is the CEO of Scottish Financial Enterprise, on the podcast today, all the way from Bonnie, Scotland. Hello, Sandy.
Yeah, good morning, Rachel.
Good morning. How's the weather today in Scotland?
It's okay. We're having a good spell of weather, so we can't complain. We often do, but we can't complain at the moment.
Very good. I'm happy to hear it. And I'm guessing that you've not been too far afield with the COVID restrictions that we have right now.
No, not at all. So, but there is some Edinburgh Festival ongoing, so managed to take in some shows. So there's a little bit of atmosphere in Edinburgh at the moment, but nothing compared to usual. But it's quite nice to see people here. Great
stuff. So listen. I know you, like me, came from a working class background, and you've entered into the financial services industry, and now you're doing the job you're doing. Love to hear a little bit about you and your story and how that panned out.
Yeah, absolutely right, Rachel. I was born in a working class council estate in a town called Musselburgh outside of Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. I had a fairly uneventful upbringing. I was distinctly average at school. I didn't dislike school, but I was one of these people who nothing came particularly naturally to me other than geography. Everything else was really hard work. So I was very fortunate to be brought up in a family that I guess instilled some core values that still guide me today. So and helped me navigate through school. But I was never able to or could go to university. So I, like many people in the early 80s, applied to what was a very large financial services industry in Edinburgh. There was all the banks, the insurance companies, etc., and who would literally take hundreds of school leavers a year. So as I say, like many people, I applied and was successful in joining the Royal Bank of Scotland in 1983, just 1 week after my 17th birthday. And again, the career path, in some ways, actually, it provided great clarity, actually, which for someone joining the industry was quite refreshing in those days, where you simply had to do your bank exams in order to progress. I didn't have the necessary qualifications, so I had to do various night classes, etc., to get to the starting point, so to speak, and progressed, thereafter through the branch network, etc., and qualified in exams. But I think one thing I learned after qualifying, because I was moved into human resources, or personnel as it was known in those days, and I simply didn't want to go there. I had no desire to go into personnel or HR at all in 1988. But that was a bit of my first main learning point in my life, which was unless you do your research and understand what an opportunity could come from being offered a position, then you quite often talk yourself out of these things because you've got perceptions and views as to what it may or may not be. And I joined, I joined HR in 1988, and then for more or less the rest of my career have had very much one foot in HR, a foot in the business, and I've never looked back. So I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd turned down the opportunity to go into HR in 1988, and where my career may have ended up, because I ended up flourishing in human resources.
And what did you love about human resources?
I think there was, I think the thing I really took to quite quickly was this idea that you could have a positive impact on people. And in some ways that's been something that's guided me through my career. And also I have been fortunate to work for some really great leaders who actually put in time, effort, investment in my development. And in HR, I realised, and hence the reason why relatively quickly I moved into the sort of training development area, was a recognition that people can be developed, people can go on to make a bigger contribution, people can be helped to fulfill their potential, whatever that potential is. And I just felt as though it was, and as I then developed through and I did an MBA in the 90s, etc., I also realised that HR, in some ways in those days, was viewed as a sort of something that happened in the corner in organisations, when actually HR really needs to be at the heart of highly effective organisations and high-performing organisations. And I lifted a lot of those learnings into then 3 transformation programs that I led as well. So I realised that when I combined my interest in people with a real commercial focus through bank exams and my MBA, I was able to bring something a bit different to the human resources field.
Fantastic. And so you touched on leadership. Was there a leader in financial service that you could really say, this leader was an incredible leader, or a leader that in the industry right now? Who might you highlight as being an amazing leader in the industry?
So as I say, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really, really good leaders, and they've had similar traits around supporting development, really trying to get the best out of you, etc. But the one I would call out that did that more than anyone else was David Nish, who was my chief executive at Standard Life when I joined in 2010. David and I had worked together at Scottish Power for a number of years earlier in my career, where he was the CFO. And we formed a really good relationship at that time, and I was leading the transformation program at Scottish Power. But David, he was one of these people who, in some ways, it was exhausting working for. He had this mentality, which was, you can always do a little bit better, and you can always get a little bit more out of you. And he used to use a lot of sporting analogies. He was a big cyclist, still is. And this whole idea of small incremental improvements was something that he firmly believed in. So, but you genuinely felt at various points when I was working for him, where you would sit back and say, I've actually managed to achieve something I didn't think was possible. And so he had this ability to push you, but not push you so hard that it put you in a really uncomfortable position, but pushed you in a way which you actually surprised yourself in terms of what you were able to deliver. And he had a tremendous support for development. I mean, in an organisation led by David, talent management genuinely meant something. You would have quarterly reviews with him. He would meet every single high potential in the organisation at some point during the year as chief executive. I mean, and nothing. I used to say nothing puts more focus on your development plan than knowing you're going to meet the chief executive to go through it. So, but he was doing it because he genuinely believed that great organisations must have, as part of their DNA, supporting people's development. And it was really powerful.
And so, as a leader in your own right now, Sandy, what do you stand for as a leader? How would you describe your own leadership style?
I think one thing and I think this is partly to do with both my upbringing, Rachel, but also my own career. One thing I've always held as a core leadership value, and a lot of people say it, but they just simply don't do it, is I always treat people the way that I would expect to be treated. I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do or I haven't done. And I think that's partly to do with, as I say, my upbringing and also the way I started my career, which was bluntly as a trainee at 17, and so I learned a trade. And I think this idea of treating people fairly. So people would say that I'm very honest, and a lot of these words other people use, but unfortunately, I've seen lots of leaders that just simply don't put them into practice. I'm very honest. I'm very open. I'm pretty direct, but people know exactly where they stand. And the other thing that people say is I'm very, very consistent, which I think is a real core value of a strong leader, a really important value as a strong leader, is that if you're an inconsistent leader, so in other words, in similar situations you behave differently, that can be quite disempowering for people because they don't really know how you're going to respond. And what people will say is that I will be extremely consistent in the way that I'll behave, which means that people know exactly, where I'm coming from, but also they know that they'll get 100% support from me as a leader if they try and do the right thing. So I've always tried to just treat people as people, and in some ways, the other thing is as well is I've always tried to build great teams, because a leader is only as good as a team, and a chief executive in some ways is the sort of highlight of that principle, because as a chief exec, you've got a team of people who are more expert at their discipline than you are, and you really need to have that best team around the table. So I think that for me, those are the things that have guided me through my career, and I think they've served me in good stead.
Very good. So another thing Flex in the City is all about is attracting young talent to the industry. And I'm really curious to know how you think financial services can attract young talent, and maybe what you'd say to a 21-year-old Sandy Begbie who was maybe thinking about joining the industry but has opportunities in gaming and other sectors.
So this is where I probably might well be a little bit controversial on this topic, because I think that financial services, if you speak to young people, and I've spent a lot of time in the last 20 years with young people on various programs that we might touch on. The perception of young people is still predominantly middle class, well educated, in the main career for people who are university educated or certainly going on to some form of further and higher education, and particularly male dominated. And until we change that perception, until we genuinely take steps that people can see and can see are visibly driving change, we won't be able to attract the level of inclusion and young people from a whole variety of different backgrounds that the industry bluntly needs to be successful going forward. There are so many different careers now in financial services, whether it's in the cyberspace, tech, data, marketing, customer space. We need a much broader base of diverse talent than we've ever needed before. But we need to genuinely change the perception of this industry amongst young people, because at the moment they've got lots of different choices they can make in schools, and by the time they actually make those decisions on the type of career they want, financial services have been ruled out for most of them. And I'll give you an exact data point on this, Rachel. In Scotland, we did a piece of research with young people around how they viewed financial services. Less than 10% of them thought it was an attractive career.
Yeah.
And that increased substantially where they had a friend or relative who worked in the industry, but where they had no connection with industry, the number was around 8% thought that they would even consider a career in financial services. And if you add in certain social economic backgrounds, that number goes even lower.
Yeah. So your own children, you've got two girls. Do they know what you do, Sandy, and do they actually care?
I think, great question. I think my eldest daughter's 25, is qualified as in law, and I think she naturally has much more connection and has ended up through her work as a paralegal, ended up being involved with financial services firms. So she's ended up getting some exposure to the industry, and therefore has an interest in it. The youngest one's an engineer, electrical engineer, and on the basis I don't build anything or fix anything, and she's quite environmentally focused, so I'm not really doing anything to help the environment, then I'm not sure she's overly interested. She's probably more interested in my 7 years at Scottish Power, to be honest, when I worked in the energy sector than financial services. But they're both to be fair, they're both at various points interested in what I'm doing, but do they fully understand it? Probably not.
So just going back to that question about branding financial services and attracting new generations of investors and potential employees, if you could wave a magic wand, what needs to happen, Sandy? What do we need to do to change the perception of this industry?
I think we need to really go into grassroots, Rachel. I think we need to, which is one of the things we're really focusing on at SFE at the moment, is really taking a strong narrative into school. but also starting in school, but also a broader narrative into society.
Right.
So I think if the question about waving a magic wand, I think it would be about opening the eyes of financial services firms, young people today, but also the broader impact that financial services can have on society. Now, we do have a lot of positive impacts on society, but there is still a lot more that we could do. But particularly in schools, I think that we need to really start to have a narrative, but also career pathways, information, knowledge, going into schools for young people to really consider careers in financial services. And we actually have a pilot at the moment in secondary schools in Scotland aimed exactly at that. But I was involved in establishing the Edinburgh Guarantee in 2011, which was aimed at reducing the youth unemployment figures in Edinburgh and the surrounding areas, which were some of the worst in Scotland on the back of the economic crisis. And it was about giving unemployed young people 6 months work experience.
Right.
Standard Life was a particularly, I would say, organisation that had never really had anything in that space at all, ever done anything much. But within 12, 18 months, we had managers lining up to take young people, unemployed people, people who you would never have recruited through a normal recruitment process because of what they saw the value that they would bring to the organisation. So I would just challenge the sector to be courageous and really look for talent in lots of different areas that they would not normally look for it.
And so that leads me on to talk about your role at Career Ready, which is a charity where you're the chairman, Sandy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that enterprise and what it does and how it works?
So Career Ready aims to work with young people, many of whom are at an age around about 15, 16, whose direction of travel would suggest that they're probably not going to go to university. They may go to college, or they may leave school and go direct into some form of employment, or likewise, they may also come from a background that will present real challenges for them. So we don't work with the most disadvantaged young people that you would maybe have someone like Bernardo's working with, but we work with young people who, unless they're given the support, may actually, fall off the path. So we run a 2-year program. Which involves having an industry mentor or a mentor from industry for every young person, including in that as a 4-week work experience in the middle summer. We've put all that online, by the way, because of COVID, so we've continued to deliver. But it's 2 years with the mentor, because a lot of these young people have difficulty connecting into education at times and may also not have a role model outside of school, particularly at home. So having that role model within industry is hugely powerful, as we found. And so really we are focused around making sure that those young people end up in a positive place after 2 years, and either going on to further education or into an apprenticeship, or in many cases, the company who been with for 2 years with their mentor, they quite often then also recruit them and may put them into an apprenticeship program or a training program or whatever. We work with thousands of young people a year, and we're really pleased with the impact that we have, and it's probably more important now than ever.
Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic impact that this organisation is having. So you have a CBE, Sandy, and it relates to business and social inclusion. And as you know, I'm passionate about social inclusion. So I'm very curious to know what social inclusion means for you and why you think that's so important for financial services.
So I think for me, social inclusion means that, and a lot of this comes back to my work with young people, but it's not. But I think the principle applies to every age group. Is regardless of background, everyone can see an opportunity for themselves in life. But bluntly, the UK, we have a core of young people, and a percentage of young people who, even during strong economic times, we still have approximately 10% of 16 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed.
Right.
And we although the headline unemployment number might be 4.5%, the reality is it's far higher for 16 to 24-year-olds. And therefore, we spend millions and millions as a country keeping young people unproductive and unconnected, and bluntly not giving them an opportunity in life. So for me, social inclusion is about, regardless of what your postcode is, where you're born, you can see an opportunity for you yourself in life, whatever career you may choose to go down. The reason why that's so important for financial services is because there is a huge source of talent in there that, if given the right support, nurtured the right way, engaging with third sector on occasions, you will find a rich vein of talent who will inevitably be more loyal to you. I usually have a thirst for learning that is, is far stronger than many other groups. They've got a commitment to you, and the biggest thing I've found is the fact that an organisation is expressing confidence in them, and actually a belief in them, and actually in some ways making them empowered to actually contribute, is so valuable to them. And a lot of these young people then thrive in those environments, as we found with the Edinburgh Guarantee, where over the course of a few years we took over 200 young people who we would never have recruited, Rachel. We introduced blind recruitment in order to remove any bias around qualifications, etc. And we did that, and we ended up recruiting young people that the recruitment system would have thrown out. So companies need to be bold and courageous, but I can assure you that they will benefit hugely on the back of that. So for me, social inclusion is just as it says. It is true inclusion where people from any background have opportunity.
Fantastic. And so tell me about your own vision for the Scottish financial enterprise. What's your vision? What's your purpose related to that, Sandy? What impact would you like to have with that organisation?
So Scottish Financial Enterprise was founded in the 80s, and it was founded on the basis it would be an independent voice for the industry. And because of the change of the shape of the economy in Scotland over the last 10, 15 years in particular, financial services and professional services are now the largest contributor to the Scottish economy. In which case, it's very important that we have a strong vision and a strong voice. We employ over 160,000 people in Scotland. We generate millions in tax receipts, and we provide a much broader impact on society. So for me, my vision for Scottish Financial Enterprise is that we are a positive, influential voice for the industry in Scotland, but also in the UK. Outside of London, we're the largest financial services industry in the UK, and it's important that we also engage at a UK level. And then beyond that, of course, Scotland also has been very successful in attracting inward investment from overseas. So at SFE, we're also keen to ensure that we start to influence and have a voice in markets that are really attractive for us overseas. So the vision for SFE, as we announced in May, is about becoming the most respected and influential business group in Scotland and a strong voice at a UK level. In terms of what we're trying to do, we're basically trying to increase our impact on society as a sector.
Right.
And that predominantly comes down to 4 areas around playing our part, which is a major part around the journey to net zero. Everything needs funding, so the industry needs to step up. Secondly is around supporting businesses as they come out of or into the economic recovery. Third is about making sure, as the industry changes, every citizen in Scotland can be connected with the financial services sector or industry, because we need to ensure that inclusion includes financial inclusion. So every citizen has that opportunity and right to that connection. And then finally is around inclusion and recognising that the industry needs a skills supply platform in order for it to continue to be successful. But that also will, ensuring that skill flow, we will also further advance inclusion in the industry. So those are the 4 things that if we feel as though we can deliver against, we will have a bigger impact on society in Scotland.
Yeah, I think you will. I think you absolutely will. And so when you're not doing all of this really valuable work, Sandy, and you're not being a dad, what else do you like doing in your spare time?
I love running. It's the kind of one thing that I've been doing for probably the last 10 years or so. I've done 3 half marathons. I'm not saying I'll do another one, but so I do run about 3-4 times a week. My wife, Caroline, and I love to travel, which obviously has been a bit curtailed recently, but fingers crossed, we'll have more things planned over the next year or so. So we do enjoy going to various parts of the world and just experiencing different cultures, which I've been very fortunate enough to do in my own career. And then the final one, which I've sort of almost grown into in the last 5 years or so, is cooking. So in lockdown is people would say it's enhanced my cooking skills. So I love it. I find it a great way to disconnect completely. I do always cook with a glass of wine, but that's okay. It seems to enhance my cooking. And I just love trying different things, and I love entertaining for people, etc. And the whole process of cooking, I just find in trying different things, I find it just great. It's great. It's relaxing, it's therapeutic, but also gives you a kind of sense of achievement when it works out.
And so, what would you say that financial services can learn from the art of cooking, and what is the special ingredient that we need to add into the recipe?
I would say it's about trying different things, and don't just stick to what you know. I'd like a lot of people, when I first started cooking, you probably have half a dozen or 10 recipes that you always go to. So you stick to what you know. The problem with that is that you end up getting stuck in a rut. And now on a weekly basis, I'll try one or two things new that I've never done before, which at times scares me, and I do wonder what it's going to taste like. But so far so good. It seems to be okay in the main. And I think financial services just need to break away from some of those traditional ways of doing things in order to think differently and try some things out. And you know what? If it doesn't quite work out, that's okay. You'll probably learn from it anyway. But also sometimes you'll be really surprised. Going back to my point about where can you go and find talent, and go and look in places that you wouldn't normally go and look.
So add a bit of spice is what I'm hearing.
Secret sauce, Rachel.
Secret sauce, very good. Sandy Begbie, who is the CEO of the Scottish Financial Enterprise. I think we have an invitation for the financial services industry to be courageous. Thank you so much, Sandy, for joining me today on Flex in the City.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Thank you.
You just listened to Flex in the City. Catch us on our next episode.